I think that one of the hardest things for most of us to accept is that we are sinners. Now, I know that there are those people, maybe those who have lived particularly destructive or violent lives, who do understand the harm that they have caused to others and who might more readily accept that their actions are sinful or even that they are sinners. I've heard people admit that they are a sinner. But for the most of us, we think that on balance, all things being considered, we are decent and good people. We don't really do anybody any harm. And so the question arises in our minds, if God is really just, why should good people go to hell? For many people it feels like God is being unkind, unjust, or perhaps even being vindictive. And that's a very serious charge to level against God. Now, it is very important that we don't talk about this subject in a light-hearted way, as so many people do talk about hell. Because hell is awful. The Lord Jesus described it in these terms: these shall go away into everlasting punishment. Matthew chapter 25, verse 46. It is a place where people will be cast off forever, in the words of Psalm 77, beyond the reach of God's love, mercy and grace. And it is the place to which we are all heading as sinners in the sight of a holy God. Now, recently I saw a YouTube clip where a question like this was being addressed. The very first thing that the man who was answering the question reminded his audience of was this: there are only two choices in the next world: to be with God eternally or not to be with God eternally. In simple terms, the Bible describes these two places as heaven and hell. And the man who was answering the question went on to ask his audience to consider a situation where a young woman was being pursued by a young man who was eager to marry her. He sent her gifts and letters, cards and flowers, but she wasn't interested in sharing her life with him. He was fine as a friend, but she didn't want his love, and she felt no love towards him. So the question that the young man faced was whether he should force her to marry him or just leave her alone. And the answer from everyone in the audience was that he should leave her alone. If he really loved her, he would have to leave her alone. Now, in our earlier videos, we have seen that this is God's world in which we live. And the way in which God has made it, we thought about as well, is that he might win us with his love. He has demonstrated his love. God commendeth his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, Romans chapter 5, verse 8. And he makes to us this offer: come unto me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. But the response must be ours. In the case of too many people, God has had to lament, ye will not come to me that ye might have life, John chapter 5, verse 40. Sin in our very nature has turned our hearts away from God, and like the girl in the story, we want in our lives to keep God at arm's length. God gave Adam and Eve choice at the very beginning. We've thought of that. God gives each of us choice here and now. We can share in God's great purpose for humanity to be with Christ, which is far better, Philippians chapter 1, verse 23. Or we can choose to be without God. But we cannot choose to escape the consequences of what is our own choice. You see, the reality is that hell is not something forced upon those who reject Christ. It is actually the only possibility for those who do not want the love of God, as has been displayed in the Lord Jesus Christ.